Many websites seem to be very cluttered today. It's probably because it's relatively easy to add animation and other eye candy with little or no programming. But cluttering up websites is not the way to make them engage the user or communicate well. To demonstrate, here's a nice clean home page. Of course, it's for a made-up company. Just watch what happens as we add more elements to the page. We have the company logo, the captivating imagery, which presumably tells a relevant story, tagline, and 2 columns of text. Don't try to read that text, by the way. That's what's called Greeking. It just indicates what the text will look like. Now, horizontal navigation bars are in vogue now, so that's what we used. They work best if there are relatively few top-level links. You see, we know from research that the most items in a series we can take in is 5. That's why zip codes are 5 plus 4, and phone numbers are broken up into 3 plus 4 numbers, and so on. Now watch what happens as we add more links. The more we add, the harder it is to take it all in, especially in all caps, which is less readable than caps in lowercase. Now with 9 links, you really have to study it to see what all is there, even with separators added so they look more like buttons. So to clutter the top even more, let's add search. Why? Well, we've seen it on other sites, and it's easy to add these days. But there's no reason to have a search field on a site like this one. It's just more stuff. Search is no substitute for well thought out navigation. But if we're of that mindset, the top is still kind of plain. So let's add the corporate slug front and center to let everyone know that Gruen is part of a bigger company. It inspires trust, you know? Now that we have the top filled up, let's move down the page to the content area. Another way to busy up the page is to add special highlighted links like these. Of course, we have to push the content farther down the page. Now, special links like these can be effective if the page was designed for them. So we still have pretty wide side margins, and why waste all that white space? Plus, all that text down there, otherwise known as information, is pretty boring looking, right? So let's add a third column at the right for special information, like links to news and news releases. Again, that by itself is not bad, especially with today's wider monitors. But another thing some sites do is make that text scroll. Now we're talking serious distraction. To make it even more distracting, let's make the main picture transition from one to another. Typically, this happens over and over again, and there's no way to stop it. So you're trying to read information on the page, and you have these distractions getting in the way. But even worse is when the text over the picture changes as well. Now we have 3 different items in motion, and we're trying to focus somewhere else on the page. Now, of course, I've also seen scrolling news and events handled another way. So let's get rid of that vertical news box and add a horizontal one instead. And of course, we have to push the actual important information even further down the page. By the way, notice that the content now takes up less than half the visual page before scrolling. This is what's known as what's visible above the fold. It's an old newspaper advertising term that we still use. Now this does open up that third column again for other stuff, like a newsletter sign-up box. Those are popular. And of course, we can get social and add the Fab 4. Need those links, right? Speaking of video, as in YouTube, we haven't added that to our page yet, so let's do that. Now video can be a great addition to a website, but give the visitor control. Don't start the video playing as soon as the page loads. Now we have 4 things going on over which we have no control other than to leave, and you don't want your visitors leaving. Now let's look at this page afresh. Not only does your eye have trouble knowing where to go first, you have real distractions in the way of taking in the information on the page. Plus, another really awful disruption is a survey or other overlay like this that slides in and covers up more of the information on the page. And they stay with you when you scroll down the page, so you have no choice but to click on them to close them. Now, how much sense does that make? Look, we've successfully covered up most of the content except for the video on this page. On sites that are selling something, we sometimes see this instead. Now, having a chat link is fine, but floating a chat window over the page like the survey box is another matter. Just get this stuff out of our way. Now let's compare that with the page we started with. What a difference. Even if we add a link to a blog and a third content column, all the information is easily taken in. The eye goes from the company name to the photo to the tagline and down to the main content. Websites should always be designed with the eye path in mind. People immediately get what this site is about, and that's what you want. As opposed to this, confusion and clutter instead of clarity. So let me leave you with this thought. Just because you can add all these elements to a web page, all this clutter, it doesn't mean you should.